So again, 2 more minutes until start time. Put your name and your college in the chat, please. You are at the ECE EDU Apprenticeship Regional Joint Venture meeting. The meeting today is for 1 hour. We're going to be discussing workforce development boards, Workforce Development 101, and its relationship to this sector. And so I did briefly announce that we have the first round of the CAI grant due in 2 weeks. We'll be taking a brief pause for meetings. We'll be starting up again in January. And if you need any help or data or assistance and you're working on CAI, feel free to email me. Okay. All right. Let's see. I've got a few more people to let in. And we have 1 more minute. And please put your name and your college or your affiliation in the chat. Thank you. And for those of you that don't know me, I recognize most of the names on here. Kathleen White, and I'm coordinating the regional joint venture for the BACCC region on ECE and EDU apprenticeship. So nice to see all of you. I hope everyone had a great holiday. And we may have time after for some brief questions, but we've got a quick meeting today. Okay, let's go to the next slide, and then Bob is going to facilitate. So again, as I mentioned, Understanding Workforce Development Boards 101, and we have with us Charles Henkels, Bob Lanter, and MaryAnn Pranke, and our facilitator, Randy Wolf, will be joining us shortly. The goal of this meeting is to develop a better understanding of the connections between workforce development boards and the role of the Workforce Development Board, including what funding may be available through the WDBs, the challenges in building collaboration between ECE and EDU, our sector specifically. And as I said, we may have time for some quick questions. So as I let in these last few folks, put your name and your college or affiliation in the chat, and welcome. And I think it's start time. So Bob, I'm gonna give this to you. I will leave the slides up for a moment so people that are coming in, make sure they're in the right place. And Bob, welcome, and I'm turning it over to you.
Thanks, Kathleen, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really nice to be here. Pleasure to see you all, and hopefully your week is off and running. Well, it's already halfway through, and happy December 1st. I'm Bob Lanter. I'm the Executive Director of the California Workforce Association. I am not Randy Wolf. Randy will be joining us shortly, and I'll be handing back over the reins of the facilitator to her when she arrives. But in the meantime, let's just start with some introductions. Randy wanted each of us to introduce ourselves somewhat in depth because we feel like most of you all know the ECE world better than us, and we're probably more versed in workforce development. So we're just going to start with some in-depth introductions. MaryAnn and Charles, I'll ask each of us to talk a little bit about our organization and how long we've been doing the work that we're doing. What is unique about our organization in terms of the workforce system, and then how we came to appreciate and understand early childhood education as an innovative and important sector. Does that sound okay?
Perfect.
So I'll start, and then I'll hand it over to MaryAnn. So I'm Bob Lanter, Director of the California Workforce Association. I've been doing workforce development now, believe it or not, for about 29 years, which freaks me out when I think about it. I've got the opportunity and have been blessed to work in workforce development at many different levels. So I have run and been case managers and career counselors right down in the field in the Bay Area. I've run workforce development boards. I've worked for the Department of Labor. I've monitored workforce boards. So I've been around and have looked at workforce development from all angles. For those of you who do not know what the California Workforce Association is, many people get us mistaken for the state of California, the California Workforce Board. We are not that organization. We are a nonprofit association. There's only 7 staff. And our members, we're a member organization, are organizations that are interested in advancing local and regional job training and workforce development. That could include all of you. It does include each of the 45 workforce development boards in the state of California, many of their one-stop operators, community colleges, labor organizations, chambers of commerce, adult education, and community-based organizations, etc. We do 3 main things at the association to advance local and regional job training. We do advocacy and policy work. So we have representation in Washington, D.C. and in Sacramento, and we sponsor legislation. And we also work with the state administration, the state workforce board, on implementation stuff. We do training and capacity building to our members and workforce development system writ large. We do 3 major conferences. Many of you may have heard of Meeting of the Minds in Monterey or WorkCon. CWA is the lead agency there. And then the last thing we do is we work on strategic partnerships. The partnerships, I mean, it's a pretty broad based on what constitutes strategic. It needs to advance local and regional job training and workforce development. So that means early childhood education. And so the last part of my introduction is, how did we come to understand this as a great opportunity? Well, many workforce boards for many, many years have worked in the childcare space. It's a tough space for workforce boards to work in because, and we'll get into the details of why it's difficult, but placement's difficult, retention's difficult. You all know that because you're working in developing a pipeline. And so it just doesn't quite meet the programmatic needs. However, workforce development has changed, and the role of workforce boards have changed. One, which they're no longer driven by program, they're driven by strategy, economic opportunity, social economic challenges. And there could be nothing more important than affordable, available, quality childcare and instructors to support the workforce. So you can't think about workforce development without thinking about childcare. So that's why we're involved, and I'll hand it over to MaryAnn.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is MaryAnn Pranke, and I'm with the Verdugo Workforce Development Board, and I'm also the coordinator of Glendale Learns, which is the California Adult Education Program on behalf of the Glendale Community College District. And I have been with Workforce for more than 30 years. I remember when Bob and I were just like little teenagers coming into the system. So can't believe that it's been over 30 years. But just like Bob, I worked in many different capacities in Workforce. At Verdugo, I'm the person that's in charge of grant writing, program development, all of the economic and legislative research analysis, and bringing all of that information to our board so they can make decisions. I'm also involved in strategic planning. And of course, then there's the entire adult education side. The Verdugo Workforce Board is one of 7 workforce boards in the Los Angeles basin. It is just so large that we almost need 7 boards to be able to meet the needs of the individual communities. And one of the areas that we have really begun to make a name for ourselves is in serving targeted underserved populations, such as people with disabilities, in particular, the career pathways that we've developed for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and targeting those with autism. And we've been very successful, and we've used what we've learned in serving that special population to serve other special populations, such as our English language learners and our homeless population, veterans, and even those that are justice involved. And it's all really based on an apprenticeship model, which is education, integrating education with technical skills training, with work experience or that work-based learning component, and using that all to transition into the workforce. So it really is an apprenticeship model. And that has been most successful for us in serving the underserved populations where they don't have time to go through education, all of the education, and come up to speed, and then go into a technical skills training and then start looking for a job or training for a job. It has to be all integrated so that they're working on all aspects of their skills at the same time. And one of the reasons why ECE has become so important for us, and Bob touched on it a little bit, but we have to. That's the bottom line. About 6 years ago, we conducted the research and the study on ECE, and we found that 6 years ago, there was already a significant shortage in the Los Angeles area. Throughout California, but specifically in Los Angeles, there was already a significant shortage of ECE qualified workers. And we knew that this shortage was going to significantly impact us over the years. Well, now it's in dire straits. And as we see all of the research coming out and the emphasis, including the emphasis in the new bills coming out for funding, and childcare is a huge issue. We can't ignore it anymore. We can't put our people to work without childcare. And even the Secretary of Labor has acknowledged that there is the great resignation that is happening, where people are just leaving the labor force. And many of them are leaving the labor force and not able to come back because their children are at home and they're involved with homeschooling, and there aren't enough childcare providers or early childhood education opportunities for them to be able to replace some of that childcare and educational opportunities. So they're not coming back to work. And so that means that our worker shortage will continue. So it's a huge cycle. And in order to break that cycle, we have to address the ECE issue. So in that regard, our director is prioritizing ECE for us here at Verdugo. So in spite of everything that's in the local plan and everything that's going on, you have to change your priorities. And this is one area that we are forced to look at because we have to.
Thanks, MaryAnn. And, this is how it works. It's probably similar to your world. MaryAnn's director that she just mentioned at the end of her comments is on my board of directors. So there's another reason why we're interested, right? Okay, thanks, MaryAnn. That was great. Charles, let me turn it over to you now.
Okay, thanks so much. My name is Charles Henkels. I'm based at Riverside Community College District, and I, watching the chat, it looks like I'll be talking to a lot of my peeps out there in the community college world. So good to see you. I'll kind of provide a little bit of a different introduction than I normally do, though, because I think it's kind of probably deserves an explanation why I'm on this panel. I'm like I said, the community college employee, and Randy asked me if I could come and be an expert on workforce development boards, and I've never worked with for a workforce development board. And so I guess kind of the introduction I want to give is a little bit of what I do, what role I play within the community college system, but just kind of within I'm going to take kind of a workforce angle at it. So my background originally, I kind of came from the apprenticeship world. I used to coordinate building trades apprenticeships. I was doing that for about a decade. And basically during that time, what was happening is I would have conversations with friends or just kind of people out in the world, and I would talk about what I did. So I'd say, yep, I work for I work for an apprenticeship firm that helps people get apprenticeships, and people would say, what is an apprenticeship? And then I'd start talking about it, and they would say, that sounds amazing. What's why are you the first person in my life telling me what an apprenticeship is? And I would joke and I'd say, you know, to be honest with you, I had the job for about a year before I could really even, you know, tell my parents what apprenticeship was. So I said, I agree with you. There needs to be more education about apprenticeship. There needs to be a, you know, better understanding. But you know, long story short, I said this should be everywhere. We should be using this method of earn and learn, you know, across the board. It shouldn't be, you know, shouldn't be the exception. So what happened was in 2016, there was a community college that, you know, decided they wanted to get into the apprenticeship ecosystem, and they hired me to be an apprenticeship director. At the time, I think there was probably just actually a couple apprenticeship director, like people in the community college system with that job title. I think there's a lot more now, and a lot of that's been due to like the California Apprenticeship Initiative. But basically, I started working with the community colleges in 2016 with the intent to help the community college I was at originally to integrate earn and learn into its existing infrastructure. So rather than just kind of thinking of apprenticeship as kind of a external, you know, kind of program, what my goal was, and what the goal of the college I was working at was to really look at earn and learn as something that could be a, you know, an integrated pathway for college students and for, you know, for people that are seeking both a job and an education. And so after, so I was at that college, Norco College. I worked there for a few years. We set up the college as an apprenticeship intermediary program sponsor. And in 2018, what happened was our region in the Inland Empire, Riverside, and San Bernardino County, you know, sort of made a pretty large investment. Basically, what our community colleges in Riverside and San Bernardino County did was they took a portion of their regional strong workforce funds, and they said, okay, we want to integrate apprenticeship. We want to make these programs happen, but we desperately need infrastructure. We definitely need to streamline our processes as far as getting new programs started. And so in 2018, the Inland Empire Desert Region Consortium, the colleges, created this thing called the Launch Apprenticeship Network. And that's kind of the hat I wear now. And so what Launch is, it's a regional apprenticeship intermediary that is hosted by the, you know, essentially it's hosted by the community college system. But we work with, you know, all sorts of different partners. Workforce, both our county workforce boards, county office of ed, all the colleges in Riverside and San Bernardino County, our K through 12 system. We've even actually just this past year started working with universities on baccalaureate apprenticeship pathways. And so I think why I got the invitation is probably more to do with that kind of work, where a lot of what I do is help connect organizations that are trying to get programs off the ground, trying to get programs started. And what I will do is I'll try to find ways to help them do that within the organization, or I'll try to find them, you know, if they're not capable of doing it, try to help them connect with the right kind of organization that will help them, you know, bring the extra needed component or the extra element to, you know, to make that happen. So this past year, we've been working on a few early childhood education programs. And what's really interesting, you know, that I would say the reason why we're pretty invested in it is I found that the early childhood educators community was one of the quickest to really just, for all the right reasons, adopt the apprenticeship model. Early on, I remember having meetings with faculty in the ECE community and with employers in the ECE community. And to be honest with you, I can't compare it to any other industry sector where everyone just seemed so ready. You know, it was almost like for the first time, I didn't need to explain as much, and I didn't need, you know, or sell as much. And it was basically, you know, a community of people that were saying, yep, they wanted to make this work. What's been fascinating, or what we've seen, you know, since we started working on these programs, is the dynamic between kind of building these programs so that they can address very local, very specific situations, but at the same time, working on this as kind of a regional and statewide initiative. And I think that's a lot of, why I love doing things like this that we're doing today, is I think this part of the work is really important too, because, groups like ESAPs, have really, I think, really made an impact and really made a difference. And they're kind of, they're kind of new. Like, I don't know that there's necessarily a category for some of the work that we're doing these days. And so, yeah, so like I said, I'm really glad to be here. I guess most of my background's in apprenticeship, a lot of community college, and I think the workforce boards is my very good cousins. We do work together all the time.
Thanks, Charles. Yeah, I mean, I think you summed it up well as to why you're on. And, I've known you for a little while now, and I know you speak apprenticeship as well as anybody in the country, and you understand some of the nuances of working with your cousins, the workforce board. So I think that's great. So let's talk about that now, working with your cousins. And maybe we'll start there because, each one of us, I think, as we go down the line, at least on my screen from Charles to MaryAnn to myself, are more familiar with the workforce system than we are early childhood education. And so what advice would we give or guidance would we give the folks who are on the Zoom call on to how they might start developing relationships with local boards and engaging the workforce system? I heard Kathleen talk about not only responding to the grant opportunities that's coming up through the chancellor's office, but just generally, how would you suggest you start building a relationship with the workforce development boards or career centers? Let's just start with Charles. Kathleen?
And Bob, before Charles starts in, some of the folks on this call, many are interested in the early childhood sector. We also have folks representing the after school sector. So
Great.
that's also childcare, but after school. And then some are interested in the teacher pipeline. So
Great.
all these jobs lead to other careers. So
Yep.
The whole gamut is represented here.
Perfect. So Charles,
Yeah.
how do you build a relationship with the workforce development boards in a way that makes them not only distant cousins, but your close cousins?
Yeah. Well, I think, and MaryAnn, I think you would kind of, some of what you said made me think about this. Apprenticeship is a great place to start building that relationship because what it does is I found it's a terrific intersection between ECE and workforce development. It's like I said, it seems to be an agreement point. And so, so I think, first of all, like I've found that to be, like I said, just a real soil or a fertile soil to, start some conversations. The other thing too, that not everyone knows, but, most workforce development departments, they hold regular committee meetings that, are open to the public. You can find the information online and say, hey, I want to go there and just hear what it is you're talking about. The other groups that I think, it's probably worth taking a little time to find out where these groups are within your region is things like the youth opportunity centers. But I think the key, like for me, where I think it worked well was, like I said, kind of starting to show up to some of those workforce meetings or attending like a workforce conference, like, the meeting of the minds of, that happens in Monterey, and just kind of, take a little bit of time just to learn who you should get to know. And I think that, is definitely how you get some good introductions. One of the things too, though, that, I don't want to forget that I think also really helps is when it comes to, engaging, what I found to be very challenging sometimes in moving from, hey, they're my distant cousins to my very close cousins that we actually accomplish things, is, moving to specifics. And so really, kind of being specific about needs that you have, that you're asking, hey, is this something that the workforce is able to help with? I'll give just kind of a quick little anecdote, but I remember early on when we were working on some programs, everyone kept saying, well, where is the funding? And there was a point where, you know, we really had to, everyone kind of had to sit down and say, okay, we can't just talk about funding like we all know what we're saying. We should actually look at this from like a budget, needs and resources. And we had each party kind of break down what it was they wanted to accomplish with the program, what resources they needed, what resources they had. And it was amazing how fast things started to move once we got specific. So yeah, so like I said, introducing yourself, going to meetings, but then also not being afraid to start diving deep into the weeds before too long.
Thank you, Charles. All right, let's go to MaryAnn. Let's talk about from a local workforce board perspective.
Thanks. And I just want to pick up where Charles left off. And that's one of the recommendations that I would have as well, is to begin by getting involved with the board and with their committees. And they're all public meetings, so you can attend. And that would at least not only build a relationship, but also give you an idea of what their priorities are and where their focus really is. And that gives you the background so you can continue building those relationships. What I find is that there are many organizations who will contact me and want me to link them up with a workforce board, as they probably do you as well, Bob, since you know everybody. And what I find is that almost everyone has at least one contact with either the workforce board or the America's Job Centers of California. So they already have a contact, and I would recommend starting with a relationship that you already have. There are several key words, and this is one of the reasons why when Randy contacted me, I was so interested. First of all, apprenticeships. Apprenticeships is a priority. It's a priority for the governor. It's a priority for Department of Labor. It's a priority for everyone who funds us and measures our performance. Now, even though, as I mentioned, I've been in workforce development for more than 30 years, I have to say that it was only about 5 years ago that I really became involved with apprenticeships. From a workforce board perspective, apprenticeships have always been a tough nut to crack. How do you start them? How do you develop them? What do you do? And it's one of those, even though it's a goal and it's in all of our local plans, we kind of set that one aside because we're not quite sure how to get that going. Well, this is where intermediaries are so critical to the process, because when Randy came to me, and she actually was coming to me so that I could link her up with another workforce board. And I'm sitting there going, wait a second, what about me? But there was some key things that she mentioned that made me cling on to Randy. Number one was apprenticeships. Number two was that she would be bringing together the partners that were needed for the program. So I would not have to do that. Remember, I'm the person that's in charge of program development. So this is typically what I do. So she would be relieving me of that. And that's a challenge in and of itself. And that she knows how to design the program already and can help put together that program. So she's relieving me of all of that. And then she was telling me where we could get the students. She's already connected to employers. And she already has connections with the colleges that would be providing the technical training. So she had all of the pieces of the puzzle, and she was bringing that forth to me. So, and I'm sitting there going, you mean I don't have to develop the program? You'll do that. And we don't have to go out and recruit students because, you know, you would be doing that. We could still recruit some of them. And I'm sure we have some in our caseloads that we could refer. And then you've already got the connection with employers, and that's a start. So everything that she brought to the table was, this is a start, and this is what we can do, and this is what we're bringing to the table. So at that point, it's like, oh, this is a no-brainer. Where do I sign up? So since then, we've been working together and to launch a program here in Glendale. But all of those pieces, it's so critical to get to the specifics, as Charles mentioned, and everything that you can bring to the table. We get so many phone calls, and typically the phone calls are something like, MaryAnn, you're the grant writer for Verdugo. write this grant
Yeah.
and then give us the money. Or we'll do the training, you place everybody into jobs.
Right.
And there's nothing about what you're bringing to the table, only what you want us to do for you. So this is a way to bring it forth and sell it, and everybody will, that's interested in an apprenticeship, that it's going to pique their interest.
Yeah, thanks, MaryAnn. Let me take a crack at this question, then I'll hand the moderating back over to Randy, and we'll have Randy introduce herself. In terms of getting to know workforce boards up and down the state, like the community colleges, every board is a little different. You heard me say earlier that their roles have really changed. They no longer should be running programs. They should be leading with strategic planning and development based on their local and regional economies and their social economic problems, right? If you go to a workforce board and you lead with the money, like, hey, you have the money and we want some, they really won't have time to engage, because they're trying to engage in what's already in front of them, and where those things lie in kind of their elected officials' strategic priorities and the people on their board. So leading with the strategy, like early childhood education, is key for the economy and for you to be successful in placing people into high wage jobs or quality jobs, because quality jobs have early childhood education and childcare available to them. They will be interested to listen to you, because it begins to check many boxes of what they're working on, right? And that leads me to one other thing, the apprenticeship word that folks have been using. Apprenticeship is absolutely right. And MaryAnn's right. Workforce boards don't really know. They're learning today how to play the role of intermediaries. Charles is a great example of an intermediary, and boards are learning to play that role. CWA has been an intermediary and a program sponsor for a statewide apprenticeship program on workforce development professionals. So, talking to workforce boards as they're expanding their roles on setting up apprenticeship programs, particularly non-traditional, is, again, will pique their interest. And then you can co-advocate together for the importance of high wage and high growth job opportunities. And that's really important too, because I'll close the loop by saying, remember, local workforce boards are working on strategic economic strategies for the region that's driven by their local elected officials. And so advocacy for affordable childcare is really key. Advocacy for better wages in early childhood education, in teachers and after-school facilitators is really key. And that's where I met Randy Wolf. She and I started advocating for youth apprenticeship, and then it just blossomed into this partnership with early childhood education. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let me introduce Randy Wolf. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you, Bob, but I have no idea what I missed, so I don't know what I'm jumping into. I would suggest we turn off the screen share so people can just see us, because it's not like they were going through slides.
Yes.
Bob, you want to give me some quick overview of what?
Yeah, so where we are really was we're just talking about how to engage workforce boards, but one of the barriers I think that people feel, Randy, we're like really on the second and third question,
Okay,
is just wages. Like they think workforce boards won't be interested because these jobs lead to typically lower wages. So the question really is that second and third question, Randy,
Right.
about lower wages.
so did you, but before we jump to that, did you, I don't know what I missed. Did you all want me to respond to anything before we go to the next question? That's what I'm just trying to figure out where we are. And I apologize to everyone. I hope Kathleen may have explained. I was at one of the meetings of the Federal Advisory Committee on Apprenticeship. Believe me, I would have rather been here. But
I think,
Randy,
ahead,
just
Kathleen.
introduce yourself.
yeah, that's
okay,
it.
so I am the Executive Director of Early Care and Education Pathways to Success, which we call ECEPS. We have been around for about 2.5 years, but our work is built upon 4 years that came before that, when we were working in collaboration with the Service Employees International Union. So since the beginning in 2015, we've had about 500 apprentices go through these various programs. At the moment, ECEPS has roughly 175 active apprentices in 3 registered apprenticeship programs, and including 3 cohorts of youth who are part of one of those registered apprenticeship programs. And so we work statewide, and we are, at the moment, I think we have about 12 partnerships with about 6 in development. So that's kind of who we are. And I think one of the things I would say to whatever, just catching the drift of what MaryAnn and Bob were talking about as I jumped on, is that part of what's happened over these past 6 years as the whole workforce system sort of pivoted to thinking much more seriously and determinedly to expand and include what they think of as new and innovative sectors, is that ECE came into its own as a focus, as an important industry. And part of that is because people like me, but not only me, started speaking up. And I think in some ways, we in ECE have an understandable chip on our shoulder that says, nobody understands us, nobody cares about us, nobody wants us. And it's understandable because, in fact, when you look at public policy and things like wages, you can see why we have that chip on our shoulder. But in fact, part of it was not anybody in the workforce's world intentionally being rude or dismissive. People don't know. And that was a learning thing for me, to meet someone like Bob. So the first time we met, I mean, here's the statewide director of the California Workforce Association. What do I know, right? I'm thinking, wow, this guy's important. What a big deal for me to get to meet him, right? And I don't know what he thought in terms of me, but it turns out he's just a guy. He's got all kinds of interesting ideas. He went with me to a meeting of the California Department of Education and spoke more eloquently about the challenge of funding this sector than a lot of ECE people could have done. And so, like we always say, it's like everything is about relationships. And in this case, it's about not only building these relationships and breaking down the silos and crossing bridges and all that, but it's educating each other. For Bob or MaryAnn or Charles, what I've learned from them, from their vantage points in this system, and then what they learned from me in terms of understanding. Ask Charles sometime to tell you what happened when he questioned our cohort model, and it did so in a public venue. So I'm just saying that because it's important, because we all have certain areas of expertise, and we only get a complete picture if we are all at the table and all being tapped into. So that's just the one thing I wanted to say. So with that, should we, oh, sorry, Bob.
Yeah, and so thanks, Randy. That's perfect. And so one of the barriers I think that people, I don't know whether the folks listening in or from the community college perspective, is this issue of quality jobs, and that these jobs in this sector are low wage jobs, right? And we know ECEPS has done a lot to kind of combat that. But maybe, Randy, we can have you talk a little bit about what ECEPS has done to combat that misnomer, and then maybe each of us can talk about, from our perspective, is that really the barrier for working with colleges on early childhood education or after school apprenticeships, or are there other things to bring to bear?
Right,
Randy,
there's a barrier. When we talk about barriers, that wages, in terms of community colleges, I don't think wages are the issue. I do think in terms of workforce development, it has been. So what I would say is, first of all, there is a misperception that all jobs in early childhood pay horribly. Entry-level jobs pay horribly. We need to change that. And even mid-level sometimes. There is no logical reason why people in early childhood should be paid less than K-12 teachers, period. That's got to be the next step goal, is to have wage equity or wage parity with the K-12 system. TK is in some ways opens a door to that, but as those of us in ECE know, it opens a door and it also opens a Pandora's box. So we'll see what happens there. But that said, I mean, I started out as an assistant teacher, and I can tell you it's been quite a while since I earned minimum wage. And I bet the same is true for a lot of the ECE people on this call, including community college professors who started out as practitioners. So that's sort of it's like what we have to be able, the talking point we have to be able to present is entry-level jobs don't pay well, but there is a career ladder. And and right or wrong, it doesn't take much training to start moving up that career ladder. That's one thing. The second thing is, the only good thing that came out of the pandemic, as far as I'm concerned, is that now nobody dismisses us. Nobody in any system thinks childcare is not important. The risk we run, though, is it's not, yes, every industry needs childcare or the people can't go to work, particularly mothers can't go to work. Let's be real here, right? Of who's staying home when the childcare system falls apart. But I don't want people to think that's the reason we have to invest in this industry, because it still ignores the fact that these are workers who have training and skills and understanding, and that the work they do is so important, because we know brain development 0 to 5, all that is so critical. And so we have to walk and chew gum. We have to advocate for the fact that without a workable, robust, healthy childcare system, nobody else goes to work, and it costs the economy enormous amounts of money. And at the same time, that's the walking. At the same time, we have to chew gum, which is to advocate for these workers as workers who deserve quality jobs, quality pay, quality working conditions, and pathways to get there. Especially recognizing that this workforce is non-traditional students, working mothers, immigrants, people of color, first-generation college students, people for whom English is not their first language. All of that makes them not a traditional group of students. And this is a whole different issue, but it begins to get to what Bob's raising about the community colleges. We don't go to community colleges and just say, hey, we need to partner with you. ECEPS has a very particular model that says we know our workforce, and we have to give our workforce the supports they need so that we meet all the standards of a registered apprenticeship, but we go way beyond those standards in order to actually make sure we're successful, or that our apprentices are successful. I don't know if I answered your question, but.
Yeah, I think you did. And I think it's really important as you're thinking about developing the workforce in early childhood education and in after-school programs, that workforce development boards have begun and have been over the last 5 to 7 years shifting their focus. And so having a conversation with somebody like Randy on the importance of the childcare industry and the workers within that industry. Not only that, MaryAnn and I know that, the 1.5 million people served by our state's career centers are predominantly low-wage, barriered employees. So they fit the mold that Randy is talking about, right? And we know that workforce boards right now are steeped in challenges to break cycles of equities, whether it's racism or gender-based equities. They're starting to look at their data, and childcare is critical to enabling workforce boards to crack that nut as well, right? So whether you're putting a pathway together for early childhood education, or whether you're putting a pathway together for trade and logistics, or whether you're putting a pathway together for ecological restoration, right? Workforce boards right now are targeting vulnerable communities and populations to show how they break cycles of inequities. This is a great, back to MaryAnn's point, silver platter, kind of way in which they can do both chew gum and walk at the same time. MaryAnn, do you want to talk a little bit about the wage issue? Because I don't think it's a real issue at the moment. I think in terms of placement, it might be, but I think those days are passing.
So yes, and no. I mean, this is an issue, and I think that this is an issue that we all need to acknowledge, because workforce boards are measured on these performance measures, which include the average wage earnings, and so that is a concern. And so there may be some workforce boards that are fine with it, and there may be some workforce boards that are more hesitant to climb on until other workforce boards get on board. You've hit two really important points, which is one, as Randy mentioned, the career ladder. They're not going to stay at an entry-level wage. So number one, that's really important. Number two, the other point that both of you have made, which is that you're serving the underserved population and needing to name them, the English language learners, the recipients of public assistance, people of color, women, those target populations that we're all trying to serve. Now, let me give you a little bit of background on workforce boards so you understand how this challenge works and how you can kind of work with them. First of all, those performance measures are tied to the formula allocation that workforce boards receive on an annual basis. They are not tied to specialty grants, innovation grants that are also available under WIOA. So many of these, especially workforce boards just starting out with apprenticeships, they'll probably be applying for an innovation grant or a specialty grant so that they can really be innovative and play with an apprenticeship and not have to worry about performance measures. There's also plenty of non-WIOA funds that can also be used for this so that they don't have to worry about that performance measures, number one. But also overall, workforce boards, even with their formula allocation, we are required to spend 30% of our formula allocated funds on training. And believe it or not, that's a challenge for many boards because there's so much money out there on training. We have strong workforce, we have career technical education, we have apportionments, we have the California Adult Education Program. There's so many pockets of money that the trainings that we pay for are actually very low cost or no cost. So we actually find it a challenge to spend our dollars. So again, this is an avenue that we can use to meet that training required enrollments. You're meeting apprenticeships, you're reaching the underserved, it's a career ladder, and you can always use specialty or innovation funds. One of the things that some of you may do, well, the CIA grant, for example, is a non-WIOA grant. So that has to be applied for by colleges, but you can bring in workforce boards to partner with you. And that is one way to begin that relationship. But also, I mean, Randy has come to me and we're looking at other innovative grants to use as well. Now, it just so happens that we have funding in-house. And so my plan is to begin the program and fund it with our own in-house funds and then use those other grants as icing on the cake to ensure that the program doesn't just last for the term of a specific grant, but it continues on afterwards. Right. So hopefully I've given you some little tips, but those specialty grants, when you bring them to the table, they're not tied to performance measures. So there's no fear in having that lower wage.
So thank you, MaryAnn. I want to make a couple of quick comments, and I don't know if you guys have given Charles a chance to talk because I wasn't here at the beginning. Yeah, but I want to raise a thing to Charles in particular as well. So one is I think Kathleen put a thing in the chat about where can workforce development boards go to get information. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that's how workforce boards learn. They're not going to go to they're not eager. They don't have any pressing reason to have to go read to enlighten themselves. And that's where this thing about relationships becomes so important. Every person on this call has a local workforce development board, and you have to get to know them, and they have to get to know you, and you have to go in with an attitude of respect and expect respect in return. That's where the work gets done. It will not, with all due respect to Bob as a statewide leader, he can't make, those of us in ECE, it's like First Five California doesn't have a lot of ability to truly impact the commission, the county-based commissions. It's a little bit, from my vantage point, it's a little bit like that. So that's one thing to say. Second thing I would say about wages is that everybody's reevaluating all these assumptions and biases we used to hit into, up to and including the California Workforce Development Board is redefining quality jobs, because they're starting to listen and noticing that essential workers during the pandemic, not only ECE, but healthcare and so forth, these people are essential and the services they provide are essential. And maybe those fields should be incorporated into the notion of quality jobs. as that notion gets adopted by workforce development boards, it eases this issue, because then they're not in any, they're no longer saying, we can't work with you, we wish we could, we just can't. Third, WIOA is undergoing revisions or reauthorization, and I don't know where it's going to land, but some other time, Kathleen, it might be useful. It won't be fun, but it will be useful to just talk about WIOA and how that funding works, because it's there, it's available, it's not easy to access. Sometimes you feel like it's not worth it to access, which may not be the case, but it's something we should think about. The last thing I want to say is, in terms of the overall issue of where is this wage issue? I said to someone recently, I wish we could organize a national strike. I so wish we could organize a national strike, because if we could get all early childhood workers to just go on strike, we'd solve the wage issue in about a day and a half. And the person said to me, don't you think that's kind of what's going on? Which is true. The fact that all these early childhood workers, home-based, center-based, won't come back to work, neither will a lot of other sectors, but I'm not talking about restaurants and other people right now. They won't come back to work because they're saying, we're not coming back to work and putting ourselves at risk for the wages you're willing to pay us. It's not a good thing. I'm not glad for the pandemic in any regard, but boy, if it makes people wake up and start thinking differently, that will be a good thing. That's the points I wanted to make. But I don't know, Charles, if you got a chance to talk about who you are and what you do and how you've taken ECE and infused it into how you do your job in terms of, do you know what I'm talking about? Have you talked about that?
Yeah. I was able to, they gave me a little time at both the beginning and then right before you jumped on. So, but yeah, well, you said, but you did say something right there that I think was pretty regarding kind of the state and the local dynamics of making these programs happen. So at the beginning, I'd introduced myself as a regional intermediary. I think of ECEPs as a state, state and kind of sector, sector intermediary. And what I found is it's really helpful, to have both, because there's just to your point, like I only just learned about teacher, master teacher, site supervisor, these ECE terms within, just within the past couple of years. But like when it comes to the programs that we're implementing in the Inland Empire, I know the people. And so even if just, I don't want to get too specific on the call, but I know like Randy and I have been wrestling through one of those little microcosm, how do we get a contract through with this really specific agency? Oh, you've got to talk to so-and-so. So-and-so will help us push, And so I think that's where you need both kind of local and sector-based intermediaries or connection makers.
Yeah, and Randy, if I can just add to a couple of points that you brought up and enter in the chat box. The funding that's available for workforce boards, people are going to be shocked to hear, is only 6% of the state's workforce funding. So when you go to a workforce board, they may not be, they may not have as much money as you think they have. In fact, you may have more money than they do, particularly if you're looking at some of the smaller workforce boards in the state, right? But that's okay, because if you're a high leveraged workforce board, if you're a high performing workforce board, only half of your budget is made up of the federal funding. The rest of your budget is made up of foundation funding, of non-formula funding that MaryAnn was talking about. And I want to go back to the strategy. Workforce boards are more and more and more looking about what is needed in their community, and then how they can partner and then bring in the funding to support that strategy. It's not about their funding and let's get more formula funding. They really are not, they're too busy trying to do the other thing to worry about that, right? They're fighting for their own funding life, because my second point, Randy, the state high road training partnership, right? That funding is not going directly to the workforce boards, because the state believes that many of the jobs the workforce boards place people in are low wage jobs. That's not true. And so if we can get the state to acknowledge, somebody put in the chat box, teachers, for example, as a high road training partnership, early childhood education as a high road training partnership, coding in IT as a high road training partnership, fire sciences and fire clearing as a high road training partnership, workforce boards would be more apt to pay attention because they're trying to figure out how to get into healthcare, construction, manufacturing, logistics, because that's what the state is funding. So,
and this is sort of a non sequitur, but I'm aware of the time I want to make this point, even though it doesn't really follow up on what Bob just said. It was something someone said earlier. Another thing I would suggest, Kathleen, and I know that we've heard from community colleges a lot on these calls in terms of model programs, but I think there's a different conversation we haven't had. And that is, it's twofold. And this is where we have to bring Charles back, but not that I'm going to put him on the spot, but it's twofold. One is the community colleges don't understand their own funding streams when it comes to sort of the intersection and lanes of RSI, FTES, apportionment, strong workforce. And I don't mean to say that, I'm not saying that to insult anyone. I'm saying that in practice, there's just concrete examples of a community college not understanding when we say you can't charge apprentices tuition, what does that mean? And I think it would really be useful if we could do a call like this with a couple of people. Charles doesn't have to be the only one, but he has to be one of them who can actually, and maybe someone from the chancellor's office who can say definitively, this is what it means when we tell you apprenticeships can't be charged tuition and fees. This is how you, as a new and innovative sector, can access apportionment dollars or RSI dollars. What is that? What are the politics involved? Why do you have to fight for something that's supposed to be yours for the asking? That's a really important conversation. The other piece of that conversation is when I go to work with a new community college and they basically say to me, oh yeah, we've done this kind of stuff before. We can do it. Yeah, sure, no problem. Then I know we're in trouble because apprenticeship is a different animal. And if a college doesn't understand that, it's a real problem. It becomes a real barrier to doing innovative things. So that's the other end of the conversation of trying to get several people, I see Monique shaking her head, right? People, or Joya, for absolutely Joya, for people in the college system to be able to talk to each other about what do I mean when I say this is a different animal? If the community colleges want to be engaged with apprenticeship, our kind of apprenticeship, ECE, the kind of work we're doing, then they have to understand this is not business as usual. So that's what I would leave you with at 2 o'clock. Turn it back to you, Kathleen.
So thank you so much. We're at time. The PowerPoint and the 2-page PowerPoint and the recording of this will be posted on the BACCC website, as this is a strong workforce funded program through June. So we'll be resuming our meetings in January. And in the meantime, feel free to email me if you have CAI grant questions or questions about this PowerPoint. This presentation, the emails to the participants today are also outlined on that PowerPoint if you want their email addresses. And I just want to say thank you, Charles, Bob, MaryAnn, Randy, thank you for your time, for your information. Again, this was Workforce 101. So we hope that we both answered some questions and sparked some new questions. And I think, Randy, your idea of really honing in on WIOA for one of our meetings would make sense, and having some sector folks talk. So thank you again, and see you next time.
Thank you, Kathleen. Sorry I was late, everybody. Good to see you all. And thanks, team, for being our panelists.
Yeah, they were great. Thank you, team. Sue, do you want to stay on?
Sure, just for a second. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kathleen. Let's see. Okay, can I? Hi, I'm here.
Hi, Sue.
So yeah, I just got an email from our TPP